Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 6 of our English 5795 online course. This week, this moody autumnal week, we are getting into writing in and into professional spaces. So over the past few weeks, I hope you've noticed a pattern as we've turned our attention to various different discourse communities that might exist or likely do exist in our writing ecologies. So this week we're going to look at kind of a lighter load of readings. We only have 3 readings this week, but each one is really rich and full of a lot of concepts and methods and arguments for us to chew on this week. So I'm going to switch over to our Canvas view, look at our assignments. They're pretty straightforward and hopefully something we are kind of getting in the groove of. And then we'll look together at the information for our mini lecture. Okay, so here we go. The week 6 module is up. And in terms of assignments, really just the 2 that we've been kind of going through for the past couple of weeks. Your reading response, which of course is your individual response to the readings, and your reflective discussion, which is where you both kind of take a synthesis and reflective moment and can then bounce ideas off of your classmates and really engage with your peers. You can see we have 3 readings, and when we look at the whole week all together, you're going to want to watch the weekly instructor video, which you're already doing, so high five. You'll want to read Miller, Evans, and Opel and Hart-Davidson, and hopefully see the various stances that they take when talking about professional spaces and writing in and for professional spaces. About today-ish, you want to watch this video and at least get 1 or 2 readings under your belt. Then by Friday, make sure again that you've watched this video, finish up your readings so that you can complete your reader response by Friday, so that you can really come to your group discussion like having everything zippered together in your brain. And if you're thinking about it, you could continue to add to your writing ecology maps. As things come up for you, as we talk about different concepts and examine different discourse communities that might seem relevant, just jot yourself a note or even physically add it onto the page. All right, so I'm gonna try this move again. We did it last time. I'm just gonna click the link and pull up the presentation. It's not as seamless, but I think it takes a little less time. Writing into and out of professional spaces. So here are our reflective questions for this week. First of all, where does productive writing happen? And what does that even mean? You'll notice I have it in scare quotes. Scarecrow quotes? I don't know. I've got autumn on the brain, apparently. What does it even mean for writing to be productive? Does it have to do something? Does it have to accomplish something? Do you have to get a certain amount written in order for it to be productive? Where does productive writing happen? And what does it mean for writing to be productive? And similarly, what counts as writing in a workplace? Opel and Hart-Davidson really kind of get into this in their piece, as we'll see. But first, let's talk a little bit about Evans. She is writing about literacy in an urban drug treatment facility, particularly for women. And she brings up a lot of interesting questions about what it means to engage with literacy in such a setting. But she's really insistent on the facility where she works and volunteers as a place of writing, and kind of gets into what that means. This is a discourse community and place of writing that is distinct from a pedagogical or school-based place of writing. This is not a classroom, right? This is a space for what Evans calls self-narration, which she really gets into, like she goes through this Mother's Journal project as an example of this self-narration, which she tries to facilitate and indeed encourage in her participants. But she gets at it, she keeps reiterating that this is a non-traditional style of literacy instruction. She's not after learning goals. She's after engagement and self-efficacy in her participants as writers. So this is really interesting because we took a whole week to consider writing in a classroom space, for the classroom, inside the classroom, and this is very directly not that. She talks about self-definition and efficacy. I keep using that word because efficacy sort of alludes to both self-definition, a sense of autonomy and authority over one's self, and production or creation. But she has to be really careful and layer that intersectionally with issues of race and class and addiction and all of the assumptions that go along with those buzzwords, which are all present physically in this space where she's teaching writing. So there's a lot of layers of context for Evans's argument here, which isn't so much any kind of like argument of policy, but she really is just trying to say, like, what would happen if? What would happen if we could conceive of writing differently? What would happen if we could examine our assumptions around folks who find themselves in this particular space and place? And I don't know if you can see this quote. My little box might be over it, but what structures our capacity to name ourselves? Evan asks. So she uses that term, what structures. She's really getting into what about this space and the place of the drug treatment facility limits or creates conditions on writing, and even beyond that, a sense of self as a writer. She says, how does this structure making a self, how does one make a self, construct a self in the midst of the collision of shifting identities and movement across different contexts? So she's acknowledging that women in this facility are so much more than what they might be labeled or assumed to be by, workers in the facility or society at large. And that's something that really can appear in their writing. So we put that alongside a totally different professional context, one that is also about a dichotomy of providers and practitioners and participants or clients, healthcare workers, patients. It's the same kind of dynamic. So Opel and Hart-Davidson are writing about a study that they've conducted in a clinic setting at Michigan State University, which is where Hart-Davidson is a professor. So they're looking at what it means to write in a primary care clinic setting, what counts as writing, which is gets at one of our reflection questions this week. And they're really honing in on the fact that charting, which is a really ubiquitous form of writing within the healthcare community, professional community, is writing. And it's very clearly both research-based and narrative-based. So they're examining literacy in healthcare contexts, but they're using some really interesting methods. So they're doing a needs analysis, which is basically an ethnographic study without calling it an ethnographic study. It's a little more pared down because they are really looking at very particular aspects of this community. They're not trying to soak up the whole vibe of the whole clinic space. They're really wanting to look at how writing is used. How does literacy function in this primary care community? And to help them create the analytical frame that they need, they use a theory called activity theory, which they describe a little bit at the beginning, and then they abbreviate with this AT, which only made me think of the first half of a empirical giant mech droid, an AT-AT. That's where my mind went. But here they mean activity theory. And so what they're doing is and I want everyone to pay attention to this because your big project at the end of the semester is going to have you using similar methods of observation and field notes. And you guys can see in the appendices of this article how Opal and Hart-Davidson organized their field notes. They used photos of artifacts and they charted artifacts because that's something they were very interested in. When I say artifacts, I mean artifacts of writing. And they did focus groups to sort of create that triangulation in their research. They noticed that clinic workers write together, obviously, of course they do, but they do not see themselves as writers. Because isn't a writer someone who sits in a cafe in Paris and, writes heartbreaking works of staggering genius? No, if you write, you are a writer. And these clinic workers are writing all the time. The observations reveal the ubiquity of writing for their day-to-day professional lives. So the whole thing is based in this needs analysis, which ends in a recommendation. And the recommendation is coordination and a sense of writing stewardship. So how can we get the clinic workers to view writing in a different way and to own their identity as writers? So we go from these two kind of focused studies that are really looking at particular places of professional writing to Miller, who is just going to talk to us about classical rhetoric and add to our stash of rhetorical theoretical frames that we can use to analyze space and place. So Miller is going to talk about particularly the space and place of professional writing environments or professional work environments, and going to add to it or say we should apply phronesis with techne and theory to create a sense of praxis. I'll get to that in a minute. So Miller just basically starts by saying, hey, classical rhetoric is really concerned with social and ethical ideas to be applied to communication, right? We do a lot of communication in business and tech writing. Shouldn't we bring that social and ethical concern to business and technical writing? And I really love this because what it highlights for me is that there is no writing that can be fully divorced from the person writing it. And the person writing it has principles and ethics and is constructed socially. So even if you're writing a memo or a white paper or a piece of technical communication, you're bringing values to it. You're bringing your principles to it. And that shouldn't go unexamined. Even though it feels like there's no life in technical writing, there really is a lot. There's a lot of creativity and choice making that comes to even technical writing. I promise. So Miller acknowledges that one of the things that is so strong in rhetorical theory is that we have a great concern for purpose as the controlling element of discourse, right? Why you're doing something or why you're writing something is incredibly important to how that writing will be received and to what that writing will do or accomplish. So Miller gets into it. She's going to break down some Aristotelian terms and talk about, theory, techne, which traditionally have been kind of seen as like the ret comp of ret comp, right? Rhetoric is where we get the theory, and composition is where we get the techne or craft. And all of this sounds great, but she says, let's not forget phronesis, which, according to Aristotle, is practical wisdom. Or Miller kind of elaborates further to talk about phronesis as the ability to make decisions when there aren't clear rules. So that aligns with a lot of more traditional faith-based definitions of wisdom, right? It's about the kind of person you are, not the rules about what to do. Because what do you do when there are no rules in a particular situation? You have to rely on the kind of person you are to make decisions. So she's going to combine all of these things and say that, hey, when it comes to business and technical writing, as in all writing, what we should do is combine all of these elements of theory, techne, phronesis, and create sort of an dynamic heuristic that can be applied to our writing, which she's calling praxis. And I don't want to leave it so cut and dry, right? When she says practice, it's really this flow. It's a dynamic, moment by moment shaping of information. So we can't think about it as something static. Practical knowledge, she says, is always shaped in local knowledge. And this is something that any scholar worth their salt has come to understand, right? The local context is going to inform how things work in any given situation, be it a research situation, a writing and communicating situation. So again, and this kind of connects us back to Evans in a really nice and elegant way, fostering an awareness of our shared assumptions is going to help us with that communication, especially when we are practicing writing within organizations that have goals and purposes that the organization wants to see accomplished. So, being aware of our assumptions about our local context, and then being aware that our communities are shaped. So think back to that first week when we looked at the concentric circles of how a smaller sphere of experience, maybe a more local context, is shaped by the larger, broader public context. And again, I think my face box is probably covering up this quote, so I will read it out loud to you. Miller writes that the information society is a socially constructed world and not just the product of technological advancement. Technology and information are social practices. So again, part of her main claim here is that there is no communication. There's no information that can be fully divorced from social practice or praxis, as Miller would say. Okay, I think that is all I've got for you here, although, of course, you guys are always welcome to email me or stop by during office hours. I actually have an appointment for my office hours in a minute here, so I'm going to go ahead and close out this video. I hope you guys are having a lovely, lovely autumn day. It's so gray and moody. Perfect for studying, right? All right, I will see you guys in next week's video. Bye, everybody.